So we're diving into Paul Graham's How to Do Great Work, and wow, it's a lot to unpack, even for a deep dive like this. It's dense, but I can already tell it's full of those little golden nuggets of insight.
Yeah, it's a good one. And one thing that struck me is that it's not just for like the super ambitious, future Nobel Prize winners.
Right.
Graham's advice feels surprisingly universal no matter what you're striving for.
Yeah, exactly. And he jumps right in, doesn't he? Gets to the heart of what makes work great.
He
And it
does.
really seems to be this balance of like the work's importance, but also how well it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sweet spot where, your passion and your ability to really excel kind of collide.
Yes. And that takes us to, well, he calls it the aptitude interest sweet spot,
Yes.
which I don't know about you, but it instantly made me think back to like things I loved as a kid.
Oh, totally.
Because for me, that was
Ah.
building these crazy, elaborate Lego cities. Like hours would just disappear.
And it's funny how those childhood passions, they can actually be really telling, right? I mean, for you, that makes perfect sense.
It does, but it's like we're often told to grow out of that, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cute, but
It's not a real job.
exactly. But Graham's saying, no, that intrinsic motivation, that spark, that's powerful stuff. It could be pointing to something you could be amazing at.
Exactly. It's about reconnecting with that innate curiosity we all have as kids. Because what fascinated us back then, it might hold clues to what we could be truly great at now, right? He even uses the phrase like it's this badge of honor, excessively curious.
Excessively curious,
Yeah.
which again, we're told to tone it down, but
Yeah.
he's saying, no, that's your superpower.
Exactly. And speaking of superpowers, that kind of segues perfectly into his point about working on the right thing.
Okay.
Because it's not always obvious,
All
right?
right.
And he talks about this sort of iterative process like guess, work, repeat. You're not going to have all the answers up front.
That is such a relief to hear
Mm.
because it takes the pressure off, right? You don't have to have it all figured out to start. You just have to start.
Exactly. And I think what's so great about that is it encourages experimentation. Like try things out, see what sticks.
Yes.
And he even challenges this idea of work being just your 9 to 5. He's like, work can be those side projects. It can be the stuff you do purely because you're fascinated by it.
Which makes me think about, you mentioned a specific interest the listener has shared, example, sustainable living, like that desire to learn and explore outside of work. That's you already on this path, isn't it?
It totally is. Although, Graham does caution against letting external pressures dictate what we work on,
Oh.
chasing prestige or a big paycheck. Those things can lead you down a path that doesn't truly resonate, right?
Right. It's about staying true to your own internal compass, even if it means taking the scenic route.
Exactly. And sometimes, even veering completely off road, it's okay if the path takes some unexpected turns.
Or like completely disappears. And you're figuring it out as you go.
And you know what? Sometimes those unexpected detours, they lead to the most amazing discoveries.
We do. It reminds me of something else Graham said. What was it?
What was it?
It was about how, yeah, like sometimes the scenic route is the one that takes you exactly where you need to be, even if you didn't know it at the time.
Exactly. And that actually reminds me of something else he talks about, which is like the mechanics of greatness.
Okay. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty, right?
Yeah, but before you start imagining like endless all-nighters and surviving on energy drinks.
Please tell me that's not what this is about. I value my sleep too much.
No, no, no. It's not about burnout at all.
Okay, good.
He talks about hard work, yes, but the key is sustainability, like finding ways to maintain that high level of output over the long haul without burning yourself out.
Oh, I like the sound of that. So how do we do that? Because I know for me, I get so psyched to start something new, but then that initial hurdle, that activation energy,
Ugh, yes, the struggle is real.
it can feel insurmountable sometimes,
Yeah.
like trying to move a mountain just to get started.
And you, of all people, are such a starter. But seriously, I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, overcoming that initial inertia.
Right.
And Graham actually offers some pretty clever strategies for tricking yourself into starting.
Okay, like what?
Like, tell yourself you're only going to work on it for 5 minutes.
Oh, I do that.
It works, right?
Yeah. Or I'll be like, okay, I'm just going to tidy up my desk, and 3 hours later, I've reorganized my entire office.
Exactly. It's finding those little mental hacks that work for you.
Yes.
And he also talks about just asking yourself this really simple but powerful question. How hard could it be?
I like that. Because we tend to overcomplicate things in our minds, make them into bigger monsters than they really are.
Yes. But, even once you start, then there's the whole finishing thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which can be a whole other beast.
Right. But he's a big proponent of what he calls shipping, basically seeing things through to completion.
I'm not always great at that. I have so many half-finished projects lying around.
Well, and that's the thing, right? It's so easy to get caught up in perfectionism.
Oh, absolutely.
But even if the initial versions aren't perfect, there's so much value in getting it out there. It builds momentum, and you can always iterate and improve as you go.
That's a good point. Okay, so we're finishing, and somewhere in there we need to be like tapping into our originality, right?
Yes. And this is where things get really interesting because Graham kind of challenges the whole creative genius myth.
Okay, because you either have it or you don't, right?
Exactly. He sees originality as a skill, like a muscle you can develop.
Interesting. So not this mystical force that just strikes randomly.
No, it's about deliberate practice, about constantly challenging yourself. And that's where his idea of the slightly too difficult sweet spot comes in.
Oh, I love that. I've been thinking a lot about that lately because I find most engaged when I'm learning something that feels just a little bit beyond my reach.
Exactly. It's like that zone where you're pushing yourself, but not to the point of feeling completely overwhelmed. And that's where the real growth happens, right?
Totally. It reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about how much you enjoy taking those online courses.
Oh, yeah. I love them.
Is there one that you've been like eyeing that feels a little bit outside of your comfort zone?
There's this one on biomimicry I've been curious about, like designing things based on nature.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it just seems so out there compared to what I normally do.
But that's the point, right? Getting out of your comfort zone.
Great.
And Graham was saying that like some of the most groundbreaking ideas, they come from making those unexpected connections.
Exactly. Okay, I'm adding it to my list. But
Okay.
anyway, back to what we were talking about with Graham.
Okay.
He also talks about the power of talking and writing to think.
Oh, interesting.
Like even just articulating those ideas, even if it's just to yourself, it can really unlock new levels of understanding.
Which is kind of meta because that's what we're doing right now.
Totally.
And it's true though. Sometimes just saying something out loud, it's like, oh, I get it now.
Yes. And if just voicing those existing thoughts can do that, imagine what happens when we really start digging deeper, like asking those why questions that he's always pushing for.
Oh, yeah, because it's so easy to just accept things at face value, right?
Right.
But when you start questioning those assumptions, even your own,
Yeah.
that's when you uncover those really juicy insights.
Yes. And it all comes back to that childlike curiosity, right?
Yeah.
That relentless pursuit of understanding. Which I guess kind of brings us to another big part of this whole doing great work thing, which is overcoming obstacles.
Because there will be
Oh,
obstacles.
absolutely. The road to greatness is rarely a straight line.
It's more like a jungle gym, right?
Totally. Or one of those crazy obstacle courses.
Yeah.
And, Graham doesn't shy away from that reality. In fact, he even points out that formal education, while valuable in a lot of ways, it can sometimes actually hinder original thought. Like, remember how he talked about schools kind of training us to just hack the test?
Oh, yeah. Get the A, even if you don't really understand the material.
Exactly. And that can really stifle the kind of unconventional thinking that often leads to those breakthroughs.
Because you're so busy trying to find the right answer, you don't even give yourself permission to explore the wrong ones.
Exactly. And this is where he says something that I just love. He's like, you can't trick God.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It's like a reminder that those shortcuts, those quick fixes, they might work in the short term.
But they won't get you to true mastery.
Exactly.
Okay, so no tricking God.
No tricking God. But he also acknowledges, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like studying the greats in your field, reading their work, seeing how they approach problems, even just analyzing their style, that can be incredibly valuable. He calls it the right kind of copying.
I like that because it's not about plagiarism.
Right. It's about dissecting what makes their work great and then seeing how you can integrate those lessons into your own process.
It's like finding mentors. Right.
Yes. Mentorship is huge. But then Graham takes it even a step further. He talks about the importance of finding your intellectual peers.
Your people.
Yes. Your tribe. The ones who get you, who challenge you, who support you when things get tough.
Because going it alone is tough.
So tough. And that actually reminds me of his section on morale.
Oh, yeah, which I thought was so interesting because he doesn't just give those empty platitudes about positive thinking.
No, not at all. He talks about it like it's a system.
Right.
Like something you actively cultivate and protect.
Yes. It's about making those choices that support your well-being so that you can, do your best work.
Exactly. So that means surrounding yourself with people who energize you, not drain you. It means taking care of your physical health.
Yes, that matters too.
Absolutely. He's all about that mind-body connection. And ultimately, it all ties back to, the work itself.
Right. Being in a good place allows you to produce that good work.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah,
that sense of optimism, that positive outlook. It can actually be a strategic advantage.
I love that. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, is there one thing that you hope our listeners will take away from Graham's How to Do Great Work?
If I had to choose just one, it would be to embrace that sense of audacious aspiration.
Don't be afraid to dream big.
Exactly. Don't shy away from those seemingly crazy ideas. Remember, originality is a muscle. You can develop it. It's not some like magical gift that some people have and others don't.
I love that. And don't forget, find your people, the ones who will support you on that journey, and take care of yourself along the way.
Yes, because doing great work, it's not just about talent. It's about creating the conditions for that talent to thrive.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Paul Graham's How to Do Great Work.
This was a good one.
It was. And as always, we want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey of exploration. Until next time, keep learning, keep creating, and never be afraid to embrace those audacious aspirations.